so much fun.
Good morning and welcome to the February 2014 meeting of the Federal Communications Commission. Before we get underway this morning, I wanted to call particular attention to and ask them to stand up to be recognized. Some of our guests from the Infocom Development Authority of Singapore, who are here as a part of our International Visitors Program. Thank you very much, all of you, for being here. Many years ago, before I was fortunate to end up on this side of the dais, I was actually, the IDA brought me to Singapore to talk about some communications policy issues. I remember some of the great examples of how Singapore is leading. For instance, the Singapore Library. Every single book has an RFID tag in it. So they operate the library at an incredibly reduced cost from any other library in the world. And so we're glad, and we hope we can learn from you. And I know we've been having exchanges on Spectrum. So thank you to all of you for being here. Madam Secretary, would you please introduce our agenda this morning?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to you, and good morning, Commissioners. Today's agenda includes 2 items for your consideration. First, you will consider a third notice of proposed rulemaking to ensure that accurate caller location information is automatically provided to public safety officials for all wireless calls to 911, including indoor calls, to meet consumer and public safety needs and expectations, and to take advantage of new technological developments. Second, you will consider a report and order, declaratory ruling, and further notice of proposed rulemaking that addresses the quality and technical compliance of closed captioning on television programming to ensure that video programming is fully accessible to individuals who are deaf and hard of hearing. The Commission also has before it today a consent agenda consisting of items 1 through 3 listed under consent agenda on the Commission's Sunshine Notice released on February 12, 2014. This is your agenda for today. The first item will be presented by the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau. Rear Admiral David G. Simpson, Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Admiral Simpson.
Thank you, Chairman Wheeler and Commissioners. Today we present a third further notice of proposed rulemaking that advances the Commission's core mission of promoting the safety of life and property of the American public by proposing requirements that will ensure that public safety answering points, or PSAPs, our 911 call centers, have access to the best available location information with each wireless 911 call. There have been significant changes in location technology and how consumers use wireless devices since the Commission last adjusted location accuracy rules. More and more Americans are relying exclusively on wireless phones for their voice communication needs. More than 70% of 911 calls come from wireless phones, and an increasing number of those calls originate from indoors. Consumers should expect that when they make a 911 call, emergency responders can locate them precisely and quickly. Currently, when consumers call 911 from a wireless phone indoors, a PSAP quite often will not receive adequate location information to locate that caller. Before we present today's item, we've invited Steve Sauter, the Director of the Fairfax County, Virginia Department of 911 Public Safety Communications, to speak for a few minutes from his perspective as a PSAP manager about the importance of location accuracy. Steve doesn't need a lengthy introduction at the Commission. He's been a leader in the 911 community for many years. Many of us have visited his call center and have seen firsthand the dedication that Steve and his staff bring to their jobs every day, like thousands of other 911 professionals all over the U.S. So it's my distinct pleasure and honor to turn the microphone over to Steve before we present the item.
Thank you, Admiral. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to be here again. As you well know, about 2 months ago in this very room, there was a workshop held by the Commission to deal with this very issue. And it is indeed gratifying that in the short span of 2 months, with 4 holidays and a number of snow cancellation dates, that you have brought this issue to the floor again today, and I want to thank you personally and on behalf of the 911 community across the nation. You know, 911 is the most recognized name in the United States of America. I don't know what we ever did without it, to be honest with you. And it celebrated its 46th birthday last Saturday. 46 years. More than half of those 46 years, it has been a combination of wireline 911 and, beginning in the mid-1980s, wireless 911. Aside from the number 911, probably the other most synonymous number associated with 911 is 94-102, which is the number of the Commission's report and order that was issued in the early 1990s to bring to wireless 911 the same kind of accuracy to the call taker, that person that answers that 911 call 650,000 times every day, to let them know where you are at, you being the caller of 911. And working very closely together, meaning the 911 community, the Commission, and the carriers, tremendous strides were made throughout the 1990s and the early part of the 21st century. But of late, beginning about last year, the 911 community began to realize that maybe some of that progress had slipped a little bit, that the level of accuracy and the speed with which it took to get that accuracy was diminishing in time rather than becoming quicker. To the credit of an organization known as the California chapter of the National Emergency Number Association, they conducted a study, and they found that that slippage had been quite considerable. And that study was kind of a warning to all other 911 centers throughout the United States, and many of us have done similar studies since, to find that, in fact, it has slipped. And that was the purpose of your workshop just 2 months ago. It is very, very important that we pick up where we had slipped a little bit, that we regain that partnership of the Commission and the carriers and the 911 community, and that we work hard at reviving that level of accuracy to back where it was and where it really needs to get even better than that. So I thank you again for taking this issue up. It is extraordinarily important to everybody in this room. That is the one common denominator that each of us have, that when we need 911, we're going to pick up our wireline or our wireless phone and we're going to call it. The men and women in this room have a unique ability because they are the decision makers. They are the people that make things happen in the federal government and in this industry. So I think working together, we will be able to regain what we had, and I hope we can do it as speedily as you were able to bring this whole issue to the attention of the nation and to bring us all together again today. So my thanks again to each of you.
Thank you, Steve. Today's further notice proposes to bridge the gap in the Commission's rules by proposing location accuracy standards for wireless 911 calls originating from indoors, as well as modifications to the existing Phase 2 rules for E911 to improve the time to first fix and accuracy of location information for wireless 911 calls from all environments. The further notice proposes measures to enhance public safety that are also consistent with other important Commission objectives, including promoting competition, ensuring that the services are universal, and addressing consumer-focused needs. It provides for a high degree of flexibility by taking a technology-neutral approach, accommodating newer technologies, and allowing carriers to determine the best technical implementation to meet individual community needs. The further notice also encourages carriers, technology vendors, and PSAPs to present collaborative solutions to meet these objectives. On November 18th, the Commission held the workshop Steve referenced on many of the location issues addressed in this further notice that fostered a dialogue between all stakeholders on how to achieve these location accuracy goals in both the near and long terms. Our overarching objective remains attainment of a standard that ensures that wireless 911 calls ultimately will be delivered to PSAPs with precise, dispatchable address information. This third further notice represents the continued effort and hard work of the Bureau staff, and we appreciate the coordinating efforts of many people throughout the Commission. I would like to give special thanks to our Deputy Bureau Chief, David Firth, as well as Erica Olson, the Bureau's Senior Legal Advisor, Nicole McGinnis, to my left, Deputy Chief in the Policy Division, Tim May, E911 Next Generation 911 Projects Manager, and Eric Ehrenreich, Dave Seal, and to my left, Dana Zellman, attorneys in our Policy Division. Diffie Osborne and Chastity Franklin also contributed to the item. I also want to thank Henning Schultzring, our Chief Technologist, Chuck Needy and Tim Brennan in the Office of Strategic Planning, and Bill Richardson in the Office of General Counsel. I'd also, though, like to thank the public safety community and industry for their spirit of cooperation and steady, positive efforts towards achieving this life-saving public safety goal. I would now like to introduce Dana Zellman, who will present the third further notice of proposed rulemaking in more detail.
Thank you, Admiral Simpson. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. The Bureau is pleased to present a third further notice of proposed rulemaking to the Commission's E911 location accuracy docket. The further notice is divided into two sections. The first section proposes location accuracy requirements for indoor environments, while the second section discusses ways to improve and update the Commission's existing E911 requirements. Today's further notice proposes to require wireless carriers who are subject to the Commission's E911 Phase 2 rules to locate 911 callers indoors in both the horizontal and vertical dimensions. With respect to horizontal location accuracy, the further notice proposes to require carriers to locate 911 callers within 50 meters for 67% of calls within 2 years of the adoption of final rules in this proceeding, and for 80% of calls within 5 years of the adoption of rules. For vertical or Z-axis location, the notice proposes to require carriers to locate callers within 3 meters for 67% of calls within 3 years of the adoption of final rules, and for 80% of calls within 5 years of the adoption of final rules in this proceeding. This 3-meter requirement would provide PSAPs with roughly floor-level location. The notice proposes that these requirements would apply nationwide on a per-county or per-PSAP basis. The proposed requirements would be technology neutral, allowing carriers to select the technology or combination of technologies that are most effective to meet these indoor location standards. The further notice seeks comment on these proposed requirements, as well as potential cost and the feasibility of the proposed timelines for implementation. The further notice proposes to allow carriers to demonstrate compliance with the indoor location requirements through an independently administered test bed, modeled on the indoor location test bed administered in December 2012 by the Communications Security, Reliability, and Interoperability Council, also known as CSRIC. The test bed would enable carriers to test location technologies in a variety of representative building types, typical of urban, suburban, and rural environments. A technology that meets location accuracy requirements in the test bed upon appropriate deployment would be presumed to comply with the Commission's rules without the need for indoor testing from all locations where the technology is actually deployed. The notice seeks comment on the proposed test bed methodology and how the test bed would be administered and funded. The further notice proposal would also allow carriers to demonstrate compliance through alternative testing methods, provided such methods demonstrate the same level of objectivity and reliability as the test bed with respect to each of the performance indicators used for measuring compliance. The further notice asks whether carriers should also report E911 call tracking data, whether to require periodic compliance testing, and how the Commission can help facilitate the resolution of PSAP concerns about E911 compliance. The further notice also proposes a mechanism through which PSAPs can seek enforcement of the Commission's E911 rules. In order to take advantage of this, however, the further notice proposes that PSAPs must be making best efforts to obtain all of the location information made available to them through the rebidding or other processes. The further notice highlights that the Commission's long-term goal is to provide PSAPs with dispatchable information for indoor 911 calls, that is, information that not only identifies the building, but also the floor level and room, office, or apartment from which the call originated. The further notice seeks comment on whether carriers can leverage in-building technology, such as small cells and distributed antenna systems, to provide this more granular location information. The notice also seeks comment on how commercial location-based services, emerging technologies, and other information sources can be used to pinpoint the in-building location of 911 callers. In addition to these proposals focused on indoor location, the further notice also seeks comments on proposals that would improve the accuracy and timeliness of location information for wireless 911 calls generally. For example, to ensure that a location is delivered in a timely manner, the notice asks whether we should establish maximum period for time to first fix in a wireless 911 call. The notice also asks whether carriers should standardize confidence and uncertainty data and provide other information about the type of technology used to deliver the location fix for each 911 call. For example, whether the location fix was determined through a GPS or through a fallback method such as advanced forward link trilateration. The notice also seeks comment on whether the Commission should accelerate the previously established time frame for replacing current handset and network-based accuracy standards for outdoor calls with a unitary standard. The current rules call for the Commission to take up this issue no earlier than 2019, but the notice seeks comment on whether to address this issue sooner in light of the rapid and widespread deployment of AGPS by both handset and network-based carriers. The Bureau recommends adoption of this item and requests editorial privileges. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Mr. Souter, thank you very much for being here, and for all of your colleagues who are here with us today, and for the great work that you do and the wonderful efforts that you have made to support the work of this Commission personally. Thank you. Commissioner CLYBURN.
Thank you. Improving emergency response times has been a primary goal for 911 services since 1967, when President Lyndon Johnson first encouraged the FCC to collaborate with the wireline industry in the development of a nationwide emergency number. Consumers have made it clear that improving response times for 911 calls from wireless phones must also be a national priority. As today's item notes, the number of American households that are wireless only has grown from roughly 16% in 2007 to 39% today. And for those living below the poverty line, that number has risen to 54%. At our November 2013 workshop on location accuracy, we listened with unease about call centers in certain areas of the country not receiving the information they needed to dispatch help to those in need because mobile calls pose more challenges to first responders than wireline calls. Citizens understandably expect and believe that their mobile handsets, especially those smartphones with location-based services, provide them with the same capacity to get help as their wireline calls. But all too often, this is simply not the case, and the results can be heartbreaking. Last month, at a Senate hearing on location accuracy, a witness testified that in Horry County, South Carolina, where you can find 60 miles of sun and fun on and near Myrtle Beach, along with millions of other visitors each year, how 50% of their 911 callers cannot provide dispatchers with meaningful location information. And with estimates as high as 80% of emergency calls being placed from cellular phones, it should come as no surprise that we have also been hearing pleas for location standards when wireless 911 calls are made from indoors. Location services must improve as quickly as possible, and the Commission's response time to that end should also be swift. We must ensure that our public safety obligations keep pace with consumer demand and technology shifts, and I commend Chairman Wheeler for bringing forth a comprehensive further notice just 3 months after the November workshop. The item includes creative rule proposals and asks a wide range of technical questions designed to improve the timeliness and accuracy of all wireless location information. It also proposes, for the first time, location accuracy standards for wireless 911 calls from indoor locations. I am pleased that we see comment on testing compliance with all of these standards and on requiring carriers to send location information within 30 seconds from the time the mobile consumer makes her 911 call. Also noteworthy are the detailed questions about how developments in roaming, Wi-Fi, location-based services, and emerging technologies can impact the delivery of location information. We need to make sure our location accuracy standards account for future innovations in mobile services. The further notice also properly seeks comment on the abilities of PSAPs to assess location data that wireless providers send. I understand some members of the wireless industry are bristling because the Commission is proposing to enhance the location accuracy rules at a pace that is seen as a bit aggressive. But today's item asks the wireless industry, the public safety entities, and others to work collaboratively toward developing alternative proposals for our consideration. And allow me to point out that one of the hallmarks of leadership in this industry is that it has, on many occasions, exceeded our expectations. We have already heard from those who concur that it is time for the industry to adopt indoor location standards, and today I wish to commend those entities. It would be great to see other examples of this kind of leadership, and for the wireless industry to actually move ahead of schedule in implementing all the proposed location accuracy rules that our nation so desperately expects and needs. I also thank Admiral Simpson and the dedicated staff of the Public Safety Homeland Security Bureau for their good work on this further notice and for the presentation this morning.
Thank you to the Commissioner from Fun and Sun. Commissioner Rosenworcel.
You know, it was like the Arctic when we met in this room last month. Now it's a little bit more like the Caribbean or maybe Myrtle Beach.
Myrtle Beach.
All right. Thank you for that. During my time at the Commission, I have made it a priority to visit public safety officials and talk about communications technologies where they work. So over the course of a year or so, I visited one 911 call center every month. That means I have seen public safety officials at work from Alaska to Arkansas, California to Colorado, Vermont to Virginia, and a whole lot of places in between. In every visit, I get the privilege of meeting emergency call operators and watching them work. They always amaze. Because when crises mount, they answer calls with steely calm and help ensure that help is on the way. In every visit, I also hear one refrain. The number of wireless calls to 911 is skyrocketing, and the data bear this out. As we've heard, more than 70% of 911 calls are now from wireless phones. That is more than 400,000 calls across the country every day. And this number is only going to grow. Today, for roughly 2 in 5 households, their wireless phone is their only phone. In some places, that number is even higher. In Idaho, for instance, more than half of all households no longer have a landline phone. In Mississippi, 1/2 of adults live in wireless-only households. Closer to home, right here, the numbers are similar in the District of Columbia. So the way we connect and call is changing. So is the way we reach out for help at our moment of greatest need. But our rules that provide first responders with information about where we are when we call 911 are stranded in the calling practices of last century. So today, under our rules, if you call 911 from a wired phone, first responders know where you are and where to send help. If you call 911 from a wireless phone outdoors, the Commission has standards that help ensure first responders can locate you and send assistance. But if you call 911 from a wireless phone indoors, you should cross your fingers and hope and pray, because no location accuracy standards apply. This is an unacceptable gap in our policies, but today we do something about it. On the heels of a hearing on this issue led by Senator Mark Pryor, we start a rulemaking to narrow this gap and fix this problem. He's been a champion on this issue, and I thank him for it. To be sure, our proposals are aggressive. But I think we can fix this problem if all stakeholders work together. I am encouraged that carriers have told me they intend to work with public safety officials and the Commission to find technologies that work. For my part, I will be watching closely. Finally, I want to note that this is important to me. I have traveled far and wide and witnessed this problem, and I have spoken and written about it at length. So I'm really pleased that the chairman made it a priority to put it before the Commission and put it on the agenda today. I want to thank him for making public safety a priority. I also look forward to working with my colleagues and icons in the public safety community like Steve Souter, who always tells it like it is, to improve our policies and make us all more safe. Because one thing is certain, when you call 911, you want first responders to find you. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Pai.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is one of the most elementary questions one can ask, but it has also been a challenging one for technology alone to answer. Where are you? The answer to this question is vital during an emergency. And for this reason, there is tremendous value in transmitting accurate location information to emergency responders whenever someone dials 911. By knowing the location of someone in need, the 911 dispatchers can send first responders immediately to the scene. Without it, police officers, firefighters, and emergency medical technicians may spend precious seconds, minutes, or even hours searching for a caller. And that is true whether a call is made indoors or outside. I saw the promise of accurate indoor location technology for myself in the summer of 2012 inside a large Silicon Valley hotel. As I rode the elevator from floor to floor on that July afternoon, the prototype device tracked me remarkably well. Had I needed to call 911 in that moment, transmitting that information could have made all the difference. I therefore support today's decision to commence a rulemaking proceeding to examine whether the Commission should adopt indoor location accuracy requirements. I also believe that we should enact rules in this area that are both aggressive and achievable. Unfortunately, I am skeptical that the timeframes proposed in today's item are realistic. As a result, I'm voting to approve in part and concur in part. Concerned about the feasibility of the timeframes proposed in the item, my office asked Commission staff and stakeholders for a step-by-step timeline that would show how it would be possible for a carrier to meet the timeframes contained in our proposed rules. But to date, no one has been able to produce such a timeline. It appears that today's proposal takes its inspiration from the Field of Dreams. If you build it, he will come. Only in this case, the mantra is, if we mandate it, they will comply. This is unfortunate. The Commission's rules should be more than aspirational. Our rulemaking process is not a feel-good exercise. It imposes legally binding obligations on regulated entities. It is unfair to saddle them with obligations that cannot be met. And such rules don't help the American people either. Indeed, they can be counterproductive, since they stand a good chance of sparking litigation or paralyzing the industry if there's no clear path to compliance. Americans recently have witnessed several instances where unrealistic mandates were imposed on businesses and had to be delayed. In order to prevent history from repeating itself, I would like to highlight two specific suggestions teed up in today's item for enabling carriers to comply with any location accuracy rules. First, the trigger for compliance should not be the effective date of the rules we ultimately adopt. Instead, the clock should start running when CISRIC certifies that a technology vendor has demonstrated through an independently administered test bed program that a solution meets the horizontal and vertical location accuracy benchmarks set forth in those rules. To me, this is simply a matter of common sense. Carriers cannot begin to deploy a technology solution that does not yet exist. And the public should not be led to rely on a promise that cannot be kept. Second, carriers should not be subject to enforcement action if they prove they are making their best efforts to deploy a technology that has been certified by CISRIC as complying with the Commission's location accuracy standards. This safe harbor would incentivize every vendor to partake in the CISRIC verification process. After all, the first to get CISRIC certification would have a leg up on competitors in getting its technology deployed in the field. And this race to certification, in turn, would have the serendipitous effect of getting an independently verified technology out in the field further and faster. This will save lives. We also need to have this safety valve because we do not know how long it will take carriers to deploy a compliant technology nationwide, or whether a compliant technology will work in every single county in the United States. Suffice it to say that deploying a compliant technology across the whole country will be a daunting and time-consuming task. Judging from our experience with Phase 2, which the FCC mandated in 1996, but will not be fully implemented until 2019, I'm skeptical that this deployment can be completed in just 2 or 3 years. The item indicates, for example, that wireless carriers are increasingly turning to handset-based solutions for providing location information. But what would that entail here? Well, first, technology in questions will need to go through the standards process. Second, device manufacturers will need to incorporate that technology into their handsets. Third, and perhaps most importantly, consumers then will need to replace their old handsets with new ones. Experience with the deployment of AGPS-capable handsets has taught us that this is a cycle that will take many years to complete, and that's if everything goes smoothly. While I wish that we could click our heels 3 times and watch this technology magically deploy itself on a nationwide basis, we are not in Oz, much to many people's chagrin. One other aspect of the proposed rules is worth mentioning. Today's item proposes that accurate location information must be transmitted to a public safety answering point within 30 seconds. At the same time, however, it also proposes to exclude from compliance determinations only those calls lasting 10 seconds or less. So what is given with one hand is taken away with the other. If a call lasts for 20 seconds, then a carrier will be penalized for failing to transmit accurate location information within those 20 seconds, even though the rule ostensibly provides the carrier with 30 seconds to do so. This does not make sense. Whatever time period we end up choosing, whether it is 10 seconds, 20 seconds, or 30 seconds, we should have one consistent measure of how long carriers have to provide accurate location information. Finally, there is another critical aspect of the location accuracy problem worth thinking about. Last month, as many of you know, I began an inquiry into the state of 911 availability in establishments such as hotels, motels, office buildings, and schools that use multi-line telephone systems, or MLTS. Location accuracy matters with MLTS systems as well, and a recent tragedy in Utah illustrates why. On January 22nd, Randy Palmer suffered a heart attack while shopping at a Midvale, Utah auto parts store. An employee in that store promptly called 911, but the call went to the wrong dispatch center because the store's phone system indicated that the call was coming from the Salt Lake City office. As a result, responders were sent to the wrong location and took about 15 minutes to get to Midvale. Unfortunately, Mr. Palmer passed away. His widow put it well when she said, quote, "People need to know what happened, and I don't want something like this to happen to someone else. My husband was the most important person in my life and in my daughter's life. The extra minutes absolutely cost him his life." To me, the lesson from this sad case is this. As we design indoor location accuracy requirements, we must not forget about MLTS location accuracy. In closing, I would like to thank the staff of the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau for your hard work on these issues. I'm always impressed, in particular in this case, at your ability to work with CISRIC, CMRS carriers who deploy AGPS, AFLT, UDTOA, and God knows how many other acronyms as you seek to promote the public interest. I'd also like to thank my colleagues for agreeing to incorporate some of my suggestions into today's item. I look forward to working together with all of you in the months to come to hasten the day when that most vexing question, where are you, becomes an academic one when it comes to emergency calling. Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Riley.
Thank you. I should start by thanking Commissioner CLYBURN for providing a bit of history on 911. I must apologize that 1967 might have been slightly before my time.
Oh, now you're just showing off.
Look at this.
As more Americans rely exclusively on mobile phones, we must ensure that first responders can quickly and accurately locate wireless callers that dial 911 in an emergency. For this reason, I'm supportive of issuing today's notice. Going forward, however, we should avoid imposing location accuracy rules that are too far ahead of available technology. Aspirational goals are laudable, but they cannot be the basis for regulation. Any requirements that develop from this proceeding must be truly feasible as judged by experts operating in the field. The deadlines we impose must also be realistic. I'm concerned that the proposed timelines for implementing indoor location accuracy requirements do not meet this objective. Many steps are needed to deploy these technologies. We learned these important lessons with the Phase 2 location accuracy rulemaking. There, the Commission established requirements and deadlines based on representations of emerging as opposed to proven technologies. It's fair to say that implementation did not go smoothly. A year after these rules were adopted, the Commission had to modify its benchmarks to provide carriers with a reasonable prospect of meeting the Phase 2 accuracy and reliability requirements. Despite this relief, the Commission still had to issue approximately 40 waivers, extensions, or stays, and a dozen enforcement actions. Therefore, I regret that I must concur with the proposed deadlines in this notice. I look forward to engaging with stakeholders regarding timeframes in which it is feasible to meet the proposed indoor location accuracy requirements. One idea is basing the effective date for any rules on a successful demonstration in a test bed that there is a technology available that meets the location accuracy requirements. But there may be others. We want to ensure that industry is capable of implementing any rules both timely and successfully so that information is available for first responders. Separately, I'm pleased that the notice raises questions about privacy. I hope the Commission will examine the privacy implications of advanced technologies and government access to consumers' location information. We need to be extremely careful as technology evolves to better pinpoint a user's location for use in emergencies. We are entering a world where the Commission may require the ability to identify a person's location within 3 meters vertically, which is basically at floor level, and 50 meters horizontally. Law-abiding Americans should not have to worry about being tracked by law enforcement or other government entities in non-emergency circumstances. Finally, I appreciate hearing from Steve Souter, the Director of the Department of Public Safety Communications for Fairfax County, Virginia, and thanking him for joining us today. I applaud his service. I would, however, like to take this opportunity to echo a comment made by Chairman Wheeler at our last open meeting. Just as we look to require providers of technology to improve their public safety offerings, we need public safety answering points to modernize their capabilities as well. I want to thank the Chairman for including a number of my edits and the dedicated staff of the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau for all of their hard work on this notice. I also want to thank my colleague, Commissioner Rosenworcel, for her work on this issue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Reilly. I concur with the observations made by all my colleagues as to the importance of this action that we're taking, as well as to its aggressiveness. But hey, we're dealing with human life. Far from being a field of dreams, far from being feel good, we're in a situation where we're making paths. You know, there was a Spanish poet who I just keep hearing in the back of my mind. I can't remember his name or his full verse, but he had something to the effect that paths, there are no paths. Paths are made by walking. We're walking today. Steve Souter referenced 94-102. I was there. I was in the wireless industry. I listened to some concerns about how it was an impossible goal, how it could never be done, and I listened to, and I was proud of others in the wireless industry who stepped up and said, "We're going to do it." And they did. And it wasn't perfect, and it wasn't smooth, and it can always be improved. And yes, the Commission had to change its minds and change its rules along the way, which we sure should always do. But the Commission and the wireless industry were setting out on a path to improve public safety and to save human life. And it's never wrong to overreach on those kinds of goals. We will remain flexible. We will remain observant. We will certainly deal with the realities of technology in the marketplace and PSAP adoption. But we will move forward because we are dealing with the most important trust that we have been given by the American public, and that is the safety of the American public. I want to concur with all of my colleagues in thanking the great work of the members of the Bureau who sit before us. I want to again recognize Steve Sauter, and not just him, but all of those that he is symbolic of in the job that they do. I want to challenge you and your colleagues again that it takes two to tango here. And you've got to be able to receive the information, and I understand that there are budget cuts you all have to live under, and I understand the incredible situation, the tightness of funds, but this agency will be helpful in helping you deliver to those that you have to go to the message that you've heard up here today about how important it is that the ability to summon help keeps pace with technology. So if there are no further comments from my colleagues, we will go to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Approve in part and concur in part.
All those opposed? The ayes have it. The item is carried. The request for editorial privileges is granted. Madam Secretary, please announce the next item.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, the second item will be presented by the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau. It is entitled Closed Captioning of Video Programming, Telecommunications for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, petition for rulemaking.
Jeez. I should have known. Way to go. Did I get it right? All right. Please proceed.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Over 16 years ago, the Commission recognized the vital role that closed captioning could play in making news, weather, sports, and entertainment on television fully accessible to individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing. Viewers' captioning experience during these intervening years, however, has been less than optimal. Today, the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau presents to you a report and order, declaratory ruling, and further notice of proposed rulemaking that seek to change that experience and bring us closer to Congress's goal that all Americans ultimately have access to video services and programming. Many in CGB, the Media and Enforcement Bureaus, and the Office of General Counsel worked long and hard on the item before you. I thank them for their work. Joining me at the table today are CGB Deputy Bureau Chief Karen PELTZ, Elliot Greenwald, Attorney Advisor, Disability Rights Office, Greg Leibach, Chief of the Disability Rights Office, Ty Jensen, a 7th grader at KENDALL Demonstration Elementary School, and Claude Stout, Executive Director of TDI. Karen will give us context and the history of this proceeding. Elliot will present the item, and Ty and Claude will help us to understand how the actions the Commission takes today will affect them and others who are deaf and hard of hearing in their everyday lives. Karen.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. In the early 1900s, going to the movies to watch silent films on the big screen was a regular pastime for people who were deaf and hard of hearing. But the talkies that came along in the 1920s all but ended these outings. In the 1950s, as television started to find its way into American homes, hearing people were presented with a new way to acquire information through news programs, dramas, variety shows, and comedies. But instead of enhancing access, this innovation became a barrier for people who could not hear. Without captions, people who were deaf and hard of hearing had no access to the words that accompanied the pictures on the screen. Television programming is not only entertaining, it provides Americans with knowledge about the world around them. In addition to information provided by the news, dramas and sitcoms expose Americans to cultural mores and societal norms. Many programs also introduce children to professions to which they might aspire. In addition, through TV, we learn courtroom procedure, social etiquette, and even medical terminology. I remember in the 1980s having a deaf client who was upset that her medical tests came back negative. At the time, with few captions on TV medical dramas, she didn't have access to programs that could have taught her that a negative test was actually a good thing. In 1980, Americans witnessed their first closed caption broadcasts with ABC's Sunday Night Movie, NBC's Wonderful World of Disney, and PBS's Mystery. But the true landmark in the captioning journey, came in 1996 with a legislative mandate to provide full access to television programming for people who are deaf and hard of hearing. In 1997, the FCC implemented this law, putting into place a schedule that required an increasing amount of captioning over a period of 14 years. Now the U.S. is a world leader on captions, with requirements for captions on nearly all English and Spanish language programming. When the Commission adopted its captioning mandates, it did not establish quality standards, expecting these to be addressed through marketplace incentives. In 2004, however, a coalition of consumer groups petitioned the Commission to address widespread captioning problems that they claimed were often severe enough to affect the comprehensibility of a program. In response to this, and a refresh notice released by the Commission in 2010, the Commission received hundreds of comments confirming inconsistencies in the way that captions were being provided, with many consumers reporting captions that were incomplete or erroneous or significantly lagged behind dialogue. Complaints about the quality of captions are also the most frequently filed complaint with our Disability Rights Office. The lack of consistency in the quality of TV captioning demonstrates that the Commission's original assumptions that the market would ensure quality captions have not borne out. No doubt, video providers have made great strides to tear down barriers to TV programming. The additional measures in this report and order will ensure that captions are not only provided, but that they are of a quality that can effectively replicate the listener's oral experience. A person is only as disabled as the barriers before them. The item before you today removes a substantial barrier to ensure that news, entertainment, and information shown on TV programming are as accessible to people who cannot hear as it is to those who can. Thank you. Elliot?
Okay. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. In this report and order, declaratory ruling, and further notice of proposed rulemaking, the Commission takes a number of actions to ensure that video programming is fully accessible to people who are deaf and hard of hearing through the provision of closed captioning. Closed captioning provides a critical link to news, information, and entertainment for the deaf and hard of hearing communities. The captioning quality standards and technical compliance rules will ensure that closed captions effectively replicate the television programming experience available to people who can hear. The report and order adopts 4 non-quantitative captioning quality standards to ensure that captions fully and effectively convey the content of television programming for viewers. First, captions must be accurate. They must reflect the dialogue and other sounds, music, and speakers in the audio track to the fullest extent possible. Second, captions must be synchronous. They must coincide with their corresponding dialogue and other sounds to the fullest extent possible and be displayed on the screen at a speed that can be read by viewers. Third, captions must be complete, run from beginning to end of the program to the fullest extent possible. Finally, captions must be appropriately placed on the screen. They must not block other important visual content on the screen, such as character faces, text, or graphics essential to understanding a program's content. Notably, the report and orders distinguishes between pre-recorded and live and near-live programming. In the application of these quality standards, taking into consideration the opportunities and challenges in captioning these different types of programming. Video programming distributors, VPDs, must make best efforts to obtain certification from their video programmers that their programs either comply with captioning quality standards, with certain best practices, or are exempt from the captioning requirements. Also, broadcast stations permitted to use electronic newsroom technique, or ENT, will be required to follow new ENT procedures recommended by the broadcasting industry for live TV programming. Specifically, these broadcast stations must script greater amounts of their in-studio and pre-produced programming and use crawls and other visual information to supplement unscripted live interviews and live on the scene and breaking news so that those who are deaf and hard of hearing have greater access to news programming in their local communities. After 1 year, broadcast stations must submit to the Commission a joint report prepared in consultation with consumer groups on the effectiveness of these new procedures. The report and order codifies the requirement for VPDs to monitor and maintain captioning equipment in good working order and to take corrective measures necessary to ensure that captions are passed through to viewers intact. In a declaratory ruling, the Commission clarifies and reaffirms existing rules with respect to the captioning of on-demand programming not subject to an exemption, bilingual English and Spanish language programming, and submission of VPD contact information. Finally, in the accompanying FNPRM, the Commission seeks comment on measures to further enhance the accessibility of television programming and to improve the Commission's procedural rules, including reapportioning some of the captioning responsibilities with others involved in the production of television programming, further improving closed captioning quality on live and near-live programming, and reporting captioning outages. The Bureau believes that the actions taken today will go a long way to fulfilling the Commission's commitment to ensuring that television programming is fully accessible to all Americans, including those who are deaf and hard of hearing. We recommend adoption of this item and request editorial privileges. We will now hear from Ty Jensen, who will speak about her experiences with captioning.
Hi. My name is Ty Jensen. I'm 14 years old, and I'm a 7th grader at KENDALL Demonstration Elementary School located on the campus of Gallaudet University. I was born in China, and I lived in an orphanage there. I moved to America when I was 7 years old. My parents taught me American Sign Language and English because at the orphanage in China, I did not have any exposure to language. When I came to America, my parents encouraged me to watch closed caption television shows, which helped me to learn English. Now, one of my favorite activities is reading. One of my favorite TV programs is Lab Rats on the Disney Channel. This is a show about bionic teenagers called Lab Rats. I love this program because the Lab Rats' mission is to save the world. The show has many situations that require problem-solving skills. This helps me become more creative and imaginative. I also like talking with my friends about Lab Rat episodes. If Lab Rats or other programs that I watch were not captioned, it would be hard for me to understand, and I couldn't follow their adventures or talk to my friends about what happens on the shows. I'm deaf, and captioning makes it possible for me to benefit from this program. It's important to have quality closed captioning for all television shows so that my friends and I can watch. Thank you.
Now we will hear from Claude Stout.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, and staff of the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau. Thank you for inviting us consumers to be on the panel this morning. You're about to produce a historical first with this pivotal action on TV closed captioning quality. Mr. Chairman, this would not have taken place today without your visionary leadership and steadfast support. Thank you. Let me share my personal experiences with the importance of captions. When I was about 10 years old, I often joined my parents and sat in front of the TV as they watched episodes of I Love Lucy. I never could lip read what they were saying on TV. Can you imagine? It was only a few months ago that I finally got to watch, with captions, Lucy and Ethel struggling to devour as many candy pieces as they could from that moving assembly line. I'm sure you all remember that program. I laughed hysterically. Another program back then was The Dating Game with host Jim Lang. If that had come with captions, maybe I would have done much better and much earlier with my sweetheart, Judy, who is now my wife. Although closed captions are now available on most television shows, our children, Abby and Ty, who are both hearing, they regularly tell us just how far behind the spoken word the captions appear on the screen for countless programs. Often they laughed or react first before we can understand why. It's not fair for parents like us to be at a disadvantage with our kids. Also, it has taken far too long to get full access to local news programs. One of the most frightening moments for my wife and I were the sniper shootings that you may remember took place in late 2002 in Maryland. Local stations in my area showed breaking news on the latest developments, but they weren't captioned. My wife and I felt trapped and helpless. We didn't know what to do. Like many of you, we watch TV to stay informed and make choices about our elected officials and on issues that matter to our communities. We also share what we learn on television when we interact with others where we live and work. When captions are garbled or missing, we do not have access to the same information that our friends, family, and colleagues have. This puts us at a serious disadvantage. when we try to participate in conversations and make decisions such as where to travel, what to purchase, and even what to wear. Good captions on TV programs allow us to keep informed and in the loop with our communities. And now that TV programs are also shown on the internet, high-quality captions on these programs have become even more critical. When enacting the CVAA, the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act, the U.S. Senate Commerce Committee noted that only 40% of working-age people with disabilities were employed. That's half the rate of those without disabilities. The committee recognized that if certain current and emerging technologies are not accessible to the disabled community, this economic disparity may increase. Enhanced accessibility could help diminish this economic divide. Improved caption quality is critical to our efforts to excel in the classroom, to compete for jobs, and to succeed on our merits. This is a great day for us today, and with your support and commitment, the Commission is building a brighter future for us, and we thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman. To conclude, I thank our guests, Ty and Claude, for being with us today on this important occasion. I also just want to mention that you may note that one of our colleagues at the table is in a sling. Elliot Greenwald, who worked very hard on this item and was one of the principal authors, was scheduled to be on a ski vacation in Colorado this week and so was going to miss this meeting. Unfortunately for Elliot, he fell and broke his arm. And being the dedicated public servant that he is, he returned from Colorado to join us today. So I want to thank Elliot. We are so sorry.
Thank you, Elliot.
We're so sorry he broke his arm, but we're so glad that you're here, Elliot. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners.
Thank you, Chris. Elliot, thank you very much. And you're going to have to learn to tie a tie one-handed, I can see. That's going to be the challenge.
Haven't figured that one out
yet. Commissioner Clyburn.
Thank you. Ni hao, Ty. Hello. And welcome to the FCC. Claude, of course, welcome back. I am so tempted to mention or say something about that dating game reference, but I will just say today that you couldn't have done better in terms of choosing a spouse. So. I think you know that. Okay. Ty and Claude, no doubt you noticed that 3 weeks ago, our nation reached an historic high mark when the first legally deaf offensive player in the NFL took the field in Super Bowl 48. Derek Coleman's debut as fullback for the Seattle Seahawks was yet another breakthrough for full and equal inclusion for those who are deaf and hard of hearing. Coleman's battle for parity with hearing players on the football field represents a hard-earned victory for which we are all proud. Not only is he a champion on the field, Coleman is a champion and role model off the field for many who face similar challenges in their lives. Today, the quest for parity remains in other arenas. One comes in an area most of us take for granted, and that is watching television. Our communications laws require that communications providers make greater efforts to provide the 54 million Americans who live with disabilities access to video services and programs, especially as video programming becomes an increasingly important role in our homes, schools, and businesses. It is hard to believe that it was only 16 years ago, as you mentioned, Chris, when the Commission adopted its first set of closed captioning rules. For the hearing impaired, our work back then was long overdue. But much has changed since then, and today it is only right and just that we refresh those rules to reflect the technological and societal changes which have transpired. The deaf and hard of hearing community has waited a long, long time for the Commission to play catch-up and address some basic concerns which seem to have gone unheard since the captioning rules were enacted. By statute, we are tasked with adopting standards and technical compliance rules to make sure that video programming is fully accessible through closed captioning. While few would argue about the importance of this mandate, the true challenge lies in how we craft and implement the rules. Today's report in order establishes a benchmark for 4 non-technical quality standards which make sure that closed captions fully and effectively convey the content of programming for the deaf and hard of hearing in the same way that audio conveys that content to the hearing community. The quality standards of accuracy, synchronicity, program completeness, and placement will help video program distributors achieve these goals. Most experts agree that effective closed captioning and live programming presents its own set of challenges, but our order will require live programming to live up to quality standards as well. I want to acknowledge the level of cooperation and collaboration led by FCC staff, which has existed among industry players and the deaf and hard of hearing community. The best practices presented in the order represents an exemplary step forward by industry. The hardest thing about being in the deaf community is getting over wall one, Coleman said last month, and while there are elements of the order and the further notice of proposed rulemaking that we need to watch carefully, this item reflects well on our commitment to the public interest, and I am glad to add my full support to this item. I would like to again commend Chris Monteith and her team and the Consumer and Government Affairs Bureau for such outstanding work, and Bill Lake and the Media Bureau for their outstanding work. And a special thanks, of course, always goes to Karen PELTZ Strauss. If I can ever learn how to say her full name without stumbling, Karen, thank you so very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Rosenworcel.
Over the next several years, television will change more than over the last several decades. The way we watch will change, when we watch, where we watch, and how we watch. Families huddling together in one room, basking in the glow of a single screen, will give way to gatherings with many screens and multiple programs. I know, it is already happening with my family in my home. But as opportunities to view video expand, old problems can linger. Today we address one of those problems. We address closed captioning. It has been more than a decade and a half since the Commission adopted its first rules governing the provision of television closed captioning. These rules, as we heard, were put in place in the aftermath of the Telecommunications Act of 1996. And they sought to make widespread access to technology that facilitates television viewing by the deaf and hard of hearing. Over time, however, captioning quality was uneven and our enforcement was limited. So a decade ago, a group of advocates representing individuals who are deaf and hard of hearing filed a petition for rulemaking and asked us to fix these problems. That is what we do at long last today. Our new rules put in place captioning standards for accuracy, synchronicity, program completeness, and placement. We establish best practices for video programmers and captioners. We update policies involving live programming and electronic newsroom technique, and we seek comment on a range of issues to further enhance accessibility and improve our procedural rules. It has taken time, but we are finally making good on the promise that television programming should be as understandable to the non-hearing person as it is to the person who can hear. Our actions will improve television accessibility for the estimated 36 million Americans who are deaf or have hearing loss, and the 40 million Americans over the age of 65 who experience varying degrees of hearing loss at some point in their lives. Now, going forward, I believe we also have other promises to keep. Today, we address the closed captioning problems that plagued us in the past. But we must also address the way we will watch going forward. Television viewing is changing fast. Our policies must keep pace. 3 years ago, Congress passed the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act. Among many, many other things, this law directed the Commission to require closed captioning of IP-delivered video programming that is also available on television. That means programming that is aired on television and later available online also comes with closed captioning. We made good on this promise for full-length programming, but I think we fell short for television video clips. I think this is something we need to fix, because our accessibility policies must be about more than how we watch now. They must be about the future. And the future of viewing, for all of us, including the deaf and hard of hearing, will involve more than gathering around the traditional television screen for programs of uniform 30 or 60-minute length. It will involve many screens with more television programming sliced and diced into smaller increments for later viewing online. Still, today is a tremendous milestone in our accessibility policies. We would not be crossing the finish line but for the steadfast advocacy of so many Americans with disabilities. They had to wait too long. But kudos to the chairman for picking up the slack with speed and bringing us to where we need to be. Thank you also to Karen PELTZ STRAUSS, the Disabilities Rights Division of the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, and the Media Bureau for all of your efforts. Finally, thank you to Claude Stout and Ty Jensen for joining us today. Claude is one of the heroes who walks among us, a tireless champion of access for all. And Ty, you are following in his footsteps at such an early age. So thank you, too, for your presentation today.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Pai.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to start this morning by extending my gratitude to our visitors. Claude is a tireless advocate for the deaf and hard of hearing community. And throughout my time at the Commission, it has been a pleasure to work with you. It is no small feat to be able to say that you are making the world a better place, and you have the entitlement of asserting that claim. Ty, I want to thank you as well for being here. At 14 years, you are remarkably more poised and articulate than I was at 14, at 28, and even now at 41. Your life is full of promise, and you are yet another example of how accessibility has the potential to unlock the full benefits of the American dream. I want to thank you and all of your other fellow lab ratters for your advocacy. Claude and Ty's testimony illustrates the critical role captioning plays in bringing the universal medium of television to those who are hearing impaired. For the medium is universal only if captions actually work to make video programming accessible. Today's item is a solid step towards improving captioning, and I'm pleased to approve it. First, the industry-derived best practices set high expectations for video programming, and I hope they will make superior captions the norm rather than a pleasant surprise. Second, the rules recognize the limited ability of video program distributors to control caption quality and focus their energy on ensuring those parts of the captioning process that are under the control work. Third, the item also helps bring our captioning rules into the 21st century by requiring that petitions for exemptions, along with comments on those petitions, be filed electronically. This is a small but significant step forward with respect to transparency. Looking to the future, I am pleased that the further notice has been split into two parts. One that is needed to complete today's report in order, and another teeing up some of the thornier, longer-term issues. The near-term portion directs the public's attention to the question of which entities are responsible for compliance with the rules. This will ensure that the Commission will have a focused, well-developed record on which to resolve the critical issue of responsibility more quickly. And in turn, giving the public more time to respond to the Commission's more complex questions will allow them to develop better, more thoughtful answers to those queries. Additionally, I am glad that the item seeks comment on creating an online dashboard to provide information about the status of closed captioning complaints. This is a particularly good example of how the FCC dashboard that I have proposed could advance the goals of transparency and accountability. A dashboard would allow consumers to monitor the status of their own closed captioning complaints, view the resolution of other similar complaints, and see broader industry trends. In short, it would allow the public to see how we are doing and to help keep us on track. I am very grateful to Claude, to Blake Reed of the Technology and Policy Clinic at the University of Colorado Law School, Andrew Phillips of the National Association of the Deaf, and Lise Hamlin of the Hearing Loss Association of America for their public support of my proposal. So far, so good on substance, but a brief note on process. The path to today's item has been far from smooth, as Claude and other advocates can tell you. It has been almost 10 years since the consumer groups filed their initial petition for rulemaking. And it's been over 3 years since the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau issued a public notice to refresh the record, as we say, in this proceeding. This delay doesn't just deny the petitioners and all of the people in America with disabilities the fair and timely hearing they deserve, and that frustrate hard-working commission staff who know and care deeply about these issues. It also forces us to work from a less than current record. While the flurry of ex parte presentations and industry diligent efforts to arrive at a consensus give me hope that we're striking a good balance here, we should have arrived at this destination much sooner. That we have arrived here today is a credit to the chairman, and I thank him for his leadership on this issue. Let me convey finally my thanks to the staff of the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, Chief Monteith, Karen PELTZ, Elliot Greenwald, Aaron Garza, and Greg Klybach, for all of your hard work on today's item. Thanks as well to the captioners hiding behind the glass. As we have all seen on the screens beside us and at every meeting, at least since I've been a commissioner, captioning a live event with jargon-filled, pop culture-infused, and occasionally rambling statements from wayward commissioners, or I should say commissioner, since I'm speaking only about myself, none of my colleagues, is quite a challenge. We appreciate your efforts today and all days. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Pye. Commissioner O'Reilly.
Thank you. I want to thank our guests as well. A very important testimony for us to hear. I really appreciate it. I must admit I'm not as familiar with lab rats. Maybe something I should check out. I'm actually very pleased that I don't know that much about the dating game. So that's good. I would say, add the last point before I get serious, and that is I was actually expecting a music reference from my good friend from Kansas, since the word synchronicity was spread out a couple of different times. So kind of surprised it didn't enter your comments. But let me be serious. Okay. Video programming plays an important role in our daily lives. It provides entertainment, influences our culture, and most importantly, informs us. In fact, this medium can be a valuable public safety tool. For example, I remember as a kid relying on blizzard and frostbite warnings during the winter months from our local television station. And that mattered not just for me, but for the 1,000 people in our town who worked outside, as my dad often did, who was extremely hard of hearing. For those in our country who are deaf or hard of hearing, a population that is growing as the baby boomers age, this tool can be limited without effective closed captioning to timely and correctly relay what is being said on screen. We are fortunate that the current technological capabilities readily enable this important function. Today, we build upon this foundation to better ensure that television captions are sufficient quality without putting undue burdens on providers. This item is the result of a tremendous amount of input and cooperation from industry participants and from the advocacy community. It strives to achieve a workable balance, and therefore I'm pleased to support it. When the order adopts new quality standards and technical compliance rules, the further notice seeks comment on a number of outstanding issues that demand quick resolution. To that end, I'm pleased that the Commission has set an effective date of January 15, 2015, so that all the pieces can come together at the same time, which will make compliance easier. On the longer-term, more difficult questions that are teed up in the notice, such as outage reporting, we need more data and analysis before they can be resolved. I look forward to commenters providing a full and robust record to the Commission. Today's item took a great deal of hard work and leadership to get across the finish line. I applaud Commissioner CLYBURN, who I understood set the wheels in motion when she was interim chairwoman. Chairman Wheeler also deserves great credit for placing this item on the agenda. And I also thank the dedicated staff who worked on this important effort. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. As so many of my colleagues have pointed out, it was 10 years ago that the deaf and hard of hearing community asked the Commission to help with something that those of us who rely on audio would not tolerate if it was imposed on us. I'm constantly reminded of something I learned from Claude Stout and his simple, elegant description when he said, "Closed captioning is what allows deaf people to hear." It's a pretty simple and straightforward concept. And picking up on what Commissioner O'Reilly said when he talked about the blizzard and frostbite warnings, when a weather forecast of high winds and a very light powdery snow shows up in captioning as 5 winds and a very light powdery snow, as it did in a weather report last month, something needs to be done. Early in my tenure, I called Michael Powell, who used to sit in this chair and who now heads the National Cable Television Association, and said we've got to do something about this to address the scope and the quality of captioning. It is a credit to NCTA, to former Chairman Powell, and their members that they stepped up to this, as did Gordon Smith and the National Association of Broadcasters to address the challenging issue of live news gathering, and to Chris Dodd and the MPIA, who volunteered to step up on the content production side. 10 years is simply too long to wait, but today we're moving forward. And my favorite ASL expression is and in that regard, I associate myself with Commissioner Rosenworcel, who talked about how there is yet still to be done and we keep evolving. Now, folks, I think we just heard today that there are 2 votes on clips. This will continue to be a work in progress. The deaf and hard of hearing community is concerned that the electronic newsroom transcript technology will not be sufficient. We'll see. The industry is concerned about big fines for small infractions. We'll see. The job with the Commission, as we have spoken in both this item and the previous item, is to keep pace with technology. And as Commissioner Pai pointed out, 10 years is too slow a pace. This is also not an act it and then forget it item. We'll keep pace with how it's working, so that the rights of both the deaf and hard of hearing community and the industry move forward. Like everyone else on the panel, I want to thank the NCTA, the NAB, MPAA, the Disability Rights Office, all of the work that the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau has done. We also, have to pause and say, of course, Karen wrote the book on this. And I want to also call out Maria Kirby on my staff, who tirelessly has worried this topic to death. Thank you, Maria. And to Ty and Claude, thank you for your advocacy, thank you for your efforts, and thank you for keeping our feet to the fire. And with that, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The request for editorial privileges is granted. Madam Secretary, please announce the items on today's consent agenda.
As mentioned at the beginning of the meeting today, you will consider a consent agenda composed of the items listed 1 through 3 under the consent agenda portion of the Commission's Sunshine Notice. For your convenience during this vote, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, I have provided each of you with a copy of the Sunshine Notice.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. This is part of the process reform that we've been talking about at this agency, and this is done with the process reform consent of all 5 of us sitting up here, hopefully a step forward. We have previously sought consent of all commissioners for the inclusion of these 3 items on the agenda. We have removed from the proposed consent agenda any item for which we received an objection from any commissioner. And for the consent agenda items listed on the Sunshine Notice, we've received no objections from any commissioner. Accordingly, I will shortly call for the vote on this consent agenda. If you are voting to adopt all of the consent agenda items, please indicate by voting in favor. If you oppose the adoption of any of the items on the consent agenda, please vote oppose. And I will call on you in turn to identify the item you are opposing by the number assigned to it on the Sunshine Notice. But I believe everybody has previously consented, so I'm not looking forward to calling on anybody. With that, all those in favor of adopting these 3 items, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it, and we have embarked on a new era of perhaps addressing the challenge that Commissioner Pai has put before us in his comments on the last item of how do we make sure that things move quickly. In that regard, would any of my colleagues care to make any announcements at this time? I have one, because we're playing catch-up ball. Paul Waters has just joined today, breaking news, in our staff as our legal intern. Paul, stand up so everybody can see you. Paul is a 3L at George Washington University, and we are very excited that he's going to be joining our team and working on the kinds of important issues that we were working on here today. So, Paul, we're really happy that you're here. Yes, good. Let's give Paul a round of applause. I agree. Okay, if there are no further announcements, Madam Secretary, will you please tell us what happens next?
The next agenda meeting of the Federal Communications Commission is Wednesday, March 19th, 2014.
And until then, we stand adjourned. Thank you. Today, playing the role of Justin Cole.
All right.
Oh, good.
Sorry.
That's your. I'm sorry. You've had your one. That's your one question, by the way.
Let's start at the end.
This is. So, do you want to set up the? You want to set up the situation, or should I just read what you handed me?
Let's go this
No,
way.
let's do the. So I just wanted to go over a couple of things here. So as you heard, today we took our third vote in 3 months to protect public safety. And how do you protect public safety in the midst of technological change? We worried about resiliency at the first meeting, then we worried about text to 911, and now we've done 911 location accuracy. Everybody, whether they're indoors, outdoors, urban, rural, should be able to get through to public safety. I've also said that our definition of universal has been one of word, not deed, with respect to the deaf and hard of hearing communities. For too long, deaf and hard of hearing communities' access has been less than equal. Reliable and consistent access to news and information is a right, period. Today's action resolves a decade-long set of concerns from the deaf and hard of hearing communities to improve captioning quality and provides guidance to distributors and programmers. And as I've said before and signed, this is just the beginning. Now, I'll be happy to take your questions. Paul Kirby from
Chairman.
Telecommunications Report, sir.
Thank you. An FCC official said recently that in a recent meeting with SoftBank and Sprint, you expressed some skepticism with a Sprint purchase of T-Mobile. Can you elaborate on that skepticism?
I think that has been reported in the press, that both the Department of Justice and we indicated that we were skeptical about the proposed transaction, and that's the extent of my willingness to comment on that situation.
Thank you.
Amy Schatz from Recode. Following on.
Hi, Amy.
Hi. Following on Paul's question, you were apparently highly skeptical of Sprint T-Mobile. Do you have any similar concerns about Comcast Time Warner?
There's an interesting situation that Sprint T-Mobile actually came to us and said, we're thinking about this. What do you think about it? Comcast never did. So I'm in a position right now of sitting and waiting for Comcast to file the requisite documents so that we can begin our consideration. We'll wait and we'll give it a full and fair and open hearing.
Brooks Bolick, Politico. So, I asked this question of your staff yesterday. Your net neutrality proposal, why should I not just view this as kicking the can down the road a little further?
You did ask it yesterday, Brooks. First of all, this is a month after the decision. There's going to be a rulemaking in the spring. I don't think we kicked the can. I think we picked it up, and we're running down the road in the direction the court suggested we ought to be going.
The Comcast TWC deal coming in under the old subscriber cap make it more palatable to you? And should the Commission revisit a subscriber cap for cable?
I think that we wait to see on the Comcast topic whether or what they propose, as I've indicated earlier, this obviously will be one of the topics on the table, and I'm unprepared to hypothesize on that at this point in time.
Lena Selyuk with Reuters. Do you believe that the broadband industry right now is competitive? And how do you see Google Fiber changing that dynamic?
You may have heard us once or twice talk about competition. And I think that the root of competition is that it is full and vibrant, and there can always be more. One of the things we talked about that we're going to be pursuing in looking at the open internet is the topic that Judge Silverman raised about municipal ownership or municipal contracting to create broadband competition. And we are in favor of competition. When Google comes in and says that they're going to build more fiber, that's a great idea. When an Australian company that manages airports around the world comes in and says that they want to build fiber for municipalities in Utah, that's a great idea. We're for competition.
But first question, do you see the broadband market as it is right now as competitive?
I think it needs to be continually growing in competition.
Bryce Vashik, Bloomberg BNA. Afternoon, Mr. Chairman. I want to follow up on your point about municipal broadband. How exactly do you intend to encourage cities and local areas to roll out municipal broadband?
Well, where we are right now is we're looking at what is the right structure for us to move forward on that. And so when we have an item, that will be more clear. But the operating hypothesis is that if the citizens of a community say we would like to have more competition and we want to work through our local elected officials to have that competition, they should be encouraged, not thwarted.
Hi, Gautam Nagesh, The Wall Street Journal. Hello. Why aren't you reclassifying broadband as a Title II service if so much of the President's base supports it? And if you are not, why leave the docket open?
Well, there are all kinds of tools in the toolbox, okay? What we're doing is we're adding, not subtracting, to what's in that toolbox. The court said that 706 is an appropriate mechanism for addressing these issues when that is done in the manner in which the court suggested. And as I've said repeatedly, we're taking the court up on that invitation.
Hey, Jim Puzangaro with the LA Times.
Hey, Jim. I loved your editorial today, Jim.
Oh, I didn't write it. But
I know, but you're close to it, so you get blamed for it, huh?
I didn't even read it, but I try not to read the editorials, and I don't have to defend them or go one with.
Would you like me to tell you what it said?
No. Is this your last crack at net neutrality without going Title II? Is this the last attempt that you think the FCC can make before that's the only option?
Boy, Jim, if there ever was a wonderful hypothetical question, that's it. The answer is that we are proceeding in the manner in which we believe we have authority and following the roadmap that the court has given us. Hi, Cecilia.
Hi. You coming from the business world, so you understand the need for some specificity and some certainty for companies. And can you clarify what, as you send a message out to people who are watching this decision, what is reasonable network management as opposed to discrimination? In other words, would, for example, a company like Verizon, let's just take out the company, an ISP charging an online video provider more for faster downloads, is that reasonable or is that discrimination in your mind?
So you raised a really good point, and that is the issue of certainty. And there needs to be certainty both for companies and for consumers. And that's the purpose of going forward with these rules. We're in the process right now of developing the specifics of what those rules are going to say. We've given you the outline in terms of where we would like to go. The kinds of specifics that you're asking would more appropriately wait until we've actually written the rules.
Hi, Chairman. Brendan Sasso with National Journal.
Brendan.
So I'll ask about E-rate. I'm wondering whether you think it's necessary to expand the size of E-rate or whether that's something that you're looking at as part of the President's proposal.
Yeah, it's a good question, Brennan. So what we've decided on E-rate is, first of all, that we can flush an additional $2 billion in right away into the 2014 program, that what we're calling is a skip the line. So if you come in and you've got a high speed proposal and you've got a consortium put together for it, that normally is something that is the hardest to approve at USAC. We want it to move up, and we want it to be the first that gets approved, and we want to put additional dollars specifically at that. At the same point in time, we are going to open a rulemaking in which we address the whole operation of the system in order to increase efficiency both at our end, but most importantly at the schools' end, and in order to figure out how to get better prices and this sort of stuff. When we get through understanding what the costs of build-out are, what the prices are, then you can figure out how far the dollars go. And that's when you then ask the question, okay, are there enough dollars in the pocketbook? And we're not there yet. Thank you, everybody.
Public safety item or the captioning items? On the captioning, okay. Oh, there's Chris, good. Anybody else on public safety? Okay, I guess we'll just move straight to captioning.
Elliot, yeah, Greg should come up too.
If you could take your conversations outside, please. Okay, thanks. Chris Monteith, Chief of the CGB, is here.
Hi, Monty, Com Daily. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you guys said that it recognizes greater hurdles between live and near live and not live captioning. Could you just talk, how does it recognize those hurdles? I mean, how is that addressed?
So the item recognizes that there's pre-recorded programming, there's live programming, and there's near live programming. For pre-recorded programming, the programmers have more of an opportunity to caption that programming offline and to review it, to edit it, to make sure that the captions accurately reflect the audio or accurately track the audio. With near live and live programming, there's simply just less of an opportunity to review, to edit, to ensure accurate captioning. So the item recognizes those differences in programming and will hold the video programmers to a higher standard here for the accuracy, completeness, placement, and timeliness or synchronicity of the captioning.
And that's how it's parsed out in the actual order. It doesn't set like any kind of numerical standard or anything. It's just saying they're held to a less high standard if it's live, period.
I think that's right.
What the item does, when you see the item, you'll see that it lays out the components and defines what
the four
accuracy,
things,
the four components,
right.
Exactly. And then it talks about pre-recorded, and then it talks about live and near live. And it's there's kind of an expectation that if you're going to have pre-recorded programming, that you are going to take the time to review and edit the captions. So there really should be very few errors on pre-recorded programming. But there's an understanding that you don't have that opportunity with live and near live.
I think also we ask in the further notice of proposed rulemaking whether there are certain techniques or technologies that might be used to ensure that captioning of live and near-live programming can be held to that very high standard of quality that we're looking for.
Okay, and then my other question was, in the FNPRM, you guys mentioned that there's discussion of reapportioning captioning responsibilities. Can you be more specific about what we're talking about there, like who's getting what responsibilities or what's being looked at? If
Sure.
there's any conclusions.
There are many parties in the chain. So there are VPDs, there are video programmers, there are captioners, there are caption vendors. There are various parties in the chain. In the 1997 order, the Commission held the VPDs responsible for the captioning. And so what we're doing here in the FNPRM is taking a look at that and seeing whether that's where the responsibility should lie. For quality, the programmers, the video programmers, may have more direct control over the captioning. And so we're examining that issue in the further notice.
And currently, the VPDs are still being held responsible at this point?
Yes.
Okay. I think that does it for me.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you very
Great.
much.
Thank you.